Why, hello, everyone. I'm hoping you can see me. I will be very honest, this is the first time we're using this technology. And so I'm just gonna say, bear with me. It's gonna be a fun adventure together. Let's see if we can get this sucker going. I'm seeing that a bunch of people are still joining the room at the moment. So I'm still gonna give it a couple more minutes to make sure that everybody gets in before I start the presentation. I'm also gonna do a couple tech checks just to make sure that everything's working. It looks like we got a great group coming on. So excited. Hi, Misty. Hi, Rita. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Shelby. Hi, Kevin. Hi, Laura. That's just a quick group I'm seeing, but so exciting. It looks like we're getting a really great group here today, and I'm so excited to share some of my tips with you. And also, we just released some new data this morning, and so I'm hoping to share that with you and help it to aid your search. Now, I'm going to very quickly just make sure if you can see me and you can hear me, please put something in the chat window. Let me know. Oh, it's so nice to see such a big group of people. I'm so excited. How are we doing? All right. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes because the number is still climbing. While we're waiting, as I mentioned already, my name is Amanda Augustine. I am the resident career expert for TopResume. If you've attended any of my live events on Facebook in the past, I really wanted to do something different this time. I wanted to be able to show slides so that there was some information. Not everybody is an auditory learner. Like myself, I need visual guides and aids. I need to see the words to truly get what's going on. And I'm sure I'm not the only one out there like that. So I really wanted to get together and be able to share my screen and show you a presentation with some of the information that I often talk about, but really focus on how can you stand out? I've done a lot of presentations on really like the technicalities of writing a resume, and I'm very happy to answer any of those questions. But I really want to focus this one today on more of that differentiation. How do you stand out in such a crowded job market? Starting with your strategy and moving towards how you're positioning yourself as you're applying for positions. And even as you're getting into more of that interview process, though I am really focusing more on the finding the leads and getting a foot in the door in order to land the interview. Because I think for a lot of people, that's a big point of stress and pain right now, more so than necessarily what happens once you're in the interview room or screen for now. So bear with me for 1 second, everyone. As I mentioned, we are using a different type of technology today. So I'm just hoping that we got everything working well. Jenna, if you can hear me, please Slack and let me know that you can hear and see me. I got my whiteboard on. I've got my audio on. I've got my video on. The numbers are starting to slow a little bit, so I think it's time to get going. All right, let me pull up this presentation. So excited to do this with all of you today. We want the entire screen. Just wait. Here we go. Let me see if I can pull this in and go into. All right. Hello. If you've ever been to one of my presentations in person or virtual, you know I like to start with a regular hello. I think it's the best. Today we're here to talk about how to stand out in a crowded job market. If you are unfamiliar with me, my name is Amanda Augustine. I am a certified professional career coach and resume writer, and I'm the resident career expert for TopResume, as well as its sister sites, Top Interview and Top CV. TopResume focuses on our US group and anybody who would use a resume to apply for a job. Top CV is more the international audience, where we're creating CVs or curriculum vitae for those countries that need that type of document in order to apply for a job. And then Top Interview, we help anyone and everyone around the country and around the world improve their interview skills, so you feel confident whether you are having an interview face-to-face or it's through a screen. There are two links on this page that I want to call your attention to. If you're looking for additional advice, you can always go to topresume.com/career advice, or just go to topresume.com and click on advice, career advice, the blog. It will all get you there. The same with Top Interview and the same with Top CV. You can go to any of those sites to receive career advice on very specific areas for your job search. I'm also really excited because this is the very first time I've been able to offer special rates to anybody who's attending an event that I'm doing. So in the past, I would send you to topresume.com resume review to get a free resume review. But now, for the very first time, I'm able to send you to one link where you can opt to get a free resume review by TopResume, and you can also purchase one of TopResume's writing services at a special rate. So topresume.com/jobsearchamanda. If you go to that link, you will be able to request a free review if you haven't had one already. And you can also look at our different packages through TopResume, and you can get a discounted rate. For anyone who's unfamiliar with TopResume, I've actually been with this company for almost 5 years. At the end of this month, it will be my 5-year anniversary there. And TopResume is the largest resume writing service in the world. We like to call ourselves a personal branding destination because your resume is one of the many materials you need to brand yourself for a successful job search. So you can check out more about that at topresume.com. And again, you can go to my special link, which I'm very excited to be able to offer now, that you can get a discounted rate. So let's talk about what are we doing today. Here's what I promised I was going to deliver in this webinar, and that is still my goal. How can we find the right opportunities for your next career move? How can we grab the employer's attention in a good way through your application materials? How can you leverage your network more effectively to make that lasting impression? And I've added a little extra. There are going to be bonus tips throughout this presentation based on the recruiter feedback we've received. We surveyed around, I want to say it was a little under 350 recruiters, hiring managers, both agency and corporate recruiters, to get a sense of how their worlds have changed and even how their criteria may have changed when looking for candidates now that we're in the middle of the pandemic. And I really think this information is very useful, very insightful, and it can inform how you can modify some of your materials and even perhaps some of the activities you're doing in order to improve your job search strategy. One thing I did not mention, which I wish I had in the beginning, is that I am born and raised in the Northeast, and I do tend to speak rather quickly. So if you need me to slow down, if you're having any questions, feel free to put them in the chat window. I will also be answering questions. I do want to have a live Q&A portion similar to the lives I used to do on Facebook, so that I can answer any questions that pop up. But definitely let me know if there's anything you'd like me to go over in more detail, or even just more slowly as we get to the Q&A portion of the presentation or the event. I'm going to admit I had a slide in here that was the good and the bads. And you know what, to be honest, I don't even think we have to talk about the bad. I think we're all very well aware, if you're attending this webinar, you know that unemployment rates are high. The job market's more crowded than ever, and there are still many sectors that haven't recovered. And so, yeah, it's a perfect storm. Not to mention, if anyone is a working parent like myself and is now trying to balance either a job and homeschooling, a hybrid, whatever it is, or a job search and all this information and all this extra work, it's a lot. So I just decided we didn't need that slide. We talked about it enough. We all know it. That's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about the good and what you can do to overcome some of that bad. So the first thing I wanted to show, because I talked to so many people who are so concerned, I've been unemployed for months now. I was unemployed before this started. What are they going to think? How am I ever going to get a job again? Whether you have a sizable employment gap or you've been unemployed for a while at this point, I want to put it out there that we did ask the recruiters and employers in the survey, and 87% said, I don't consider either of those to be a red flag, to have a stigma on it, as I would have before the pandemic. And so that's one thing that I just want you to kind of push to the side. It's so widespread. Layoffs are never or normally performance-based. There's so many people out of work that you're in good company these days, and employers are just kind of brushing that aside and really focusing on what does the candidate have to offer. And that's something I want you to keep in the back of your mind when you start going to that dark place, that it's not necessarily a big hit against me for the vast majority of employers. They seem unfazed by it, and good, as they should. Now, this is one of my favorite charts in the whole wide world. And if you've attended any of my live events or any of my in-person events, you've probably seen some variation of the slide in the past, because I think it's such a great visual to help people organize their job search. When you're looking for a job, you automatically become a marketer. Doesn't matter what you do for a living, you have to put on a sales and marketing hat, because that is the exercise that you're going through now. You are basically putting yourself into a sales funnel and trying to get to that ultimate close at the end where you are landing a new job. And so I think this is a really great way, especially if you haven't looked for a job in a while. Organize yourself with this in mind. You want to start in the prep phase, your job goals. What are you looking for? You're going to build your marketing materials. You're building your personal marketing campaign. Think your resume, your cover letter. When I say online brand, that means whatever anyone's going to see about you if they Google your name, as well as the specific sites you want them to go to. Maybe it's a LinkedIn profile. Maybe it's an online portfolio. Maybe it's a particular other social media channel. How do you make sure you're directing them to the things you want them to see, and hiding the stuff that doesn't necessarily support your job search? And then also think about your references. Even if you haven't landed an interview yet, line up some references. Identify at least 3 people from different parts of your career, maybe someone you managed, somebody you worked with, somebody who managed you, that you feel confident would advocate on your behalf, and always get their permission first. So that's all kind of the prep phase. And that's a lot of what TopResume helps. We help with the resume, the cover letter, the LinkedIn profile. We even help you distribute, your resume so that you're getting more online exposure. We also dabble in a little others, but that's really a lot of what TopResume and what TopCV offers. The search phase is all about identifying and pursuing potential leads. So think about it as, what are those job opportunities? What are those particular employers that are on the top of your target list? And then how do you find those job listings? How do you leverage recruiters effectively? And how do you leverage your personal and professional connections to help you identify those opportunities and then land that interview? The close phase is all about really interviewing, right? It's getting face-to-face over the phone or through a screen and talking with someone, giving them your sales pitch about why you're a good fit for whatever they're trying to fill, negotiating that deal, and closing it. And then I always say onboarding is an extension of the interview process. Those first 90 days you're in that new job. So I like to include it in this close phase, because with any new job, you're still feeling that company out. They're still feeling you out. we're all trying to make sure we've made the right decision. And so it's still a time period where we're all just trying to still audition to be the best candidate for the role. In fact, that's why most agency recruiters do not get their full commission for recommending the candidate who lands the job until that person hits day 90 of the job. I tell this story a lot, but my husband quit a job on day 88. And as somebody in this industry, I was like, oh, please don't do that. Oh, that poor recruiter. You know, he didn't know. But again, it just points out that really those first 90 days, we're all still trying to figure things out. I hope that makes sense. And we're going to refer to this chart throughout the webinar. I'm just going to put a little note out there because now that I'm sharing in this mode, I can't see all of you and I can't see if comments are coming in at the moment. So I am going to just tell my lovely moderator, Jenna, because I know she is also in the live room there, comments. Jenna, if you could just text me if anything is amiss when it comes to the technology, because I can't see the notifications at the moment. And I want to make sure that I'm not rambling on with all these great nuggets of job search advice if nobody can hear them or see them. And I do have it, I do have my phone on silent, so we should be good. We may hear my golden retriever bark in the background. I'm just giving you a heads up. Might as well keep it real, right? Okay, we're going to start with job goals and job fit because, again, that is something I really wanted to talk about because this job market, this economy, everything that's going on right now, it's changing things. I think the basic structure of the job search is still remaining the same, but how you execute some of these things is going to be different right now for obvious reasons. Not everybody's industry is hiring right now. They're on hiring freezes. A lot of people have to consider what's going on at home and health-wise, what does that mean? And that's going to influence what types of roles they're going to pursue and if they're that sort of thing. So I really want to talk a little bit about job goals and identifying what is your current target. This is a slide I really love to talk to because you really need to do a little soul searching. You need to explore what opportunities are available. And that's through some of the traditional channels, going to job boards, talking to people that you know that are in a similar boat, or people that you know that are still employed, that are in a similar field, and getting a feel for what's available right now. And I'm going to, in a couple slides, or one I think maybe, give you a list of different resources you can use that are not just your average job board. But you really need to do some exploring. Take a step back and say, okay, what am I looking for right now? What is my job search about? Do I need a job right now? Am I looking for something that's temporary or contract work? Maybe something that's completely outside my field? Am I looking for a remote opportunity, whereas I've never really looked for that in the past? Or am I trying to turn some hobby or side gig into something more lucrative to help, pay the bills? Those are the jobs that are often considered for right now. It's the short-term plan. I need to pay my bills, so I need to figure something out now because my industry isn't hiring or because I'm having a lot of trouble finding the right opportunities, whatever that might be. There's also the right job. So think the long-term plan. This is the job I want full-time. I want it on a permanent basis. It's in the career path that I was doing before and I want to continue doing. Or maybe I'm trying to make a change and this is the long-term goal of where I want to be. These are different searches and require different search materials and different strategies because obviously one is immediate and one you may be looking longer in order to get that role, particularly in this job market. Does that make sense? And one thing I want to keep in mind and just point out for everyone is that you could actually be doing both of these. You could be conducting both of these job searches. You could be still trying to make inroads and gather the right skills and make yourself more attractive and better qualified for the long-term goal. Or you could be really nurturing your professional network for the people who are in the field or industry that you want to return to or you're looking to move into while you take the job that's short term. That's a little diversion outside of the career path that you had chosen for yourself. And that's okay. I don't think you're going to find a lot of employers, similar to how they're not that concerned about an employment gap or being unemployed right now when they're looking at candidates. I don't think any of them are, I think the same majority are going to also say, hey, if they took something wildly outside their career path during this time period, I know exactly why, because I know what was going on in the job market at that time. And so I think we're going to all have a lot of forgiveness in those areas and don't consider that to be something that needs to stop you from making that decision. Now, when you're trying to figure out where you're going, I used to have only your finances, your industry and sector, and your location as factors to consider, because these all have to do with how long can I float on my savings, or am I fortunate enough to have a household where somebody else isn't fully employed or is feeling very secure, and so I have the luxury of waiting for the right job instead of perhaps settling or targeting a more short-term solution. It has a lot to do with your industry and sector. If you're in entertainment, you know that you can get creative, you can start doing things virtually, you can really do that sort of thing. But if you're looking to perform on a stage in a theater, we know that that's being pushed out for quite a while, and so obviously there are some short-term planning that needs to take place. Also your location, what's available, and I added this fourth one because I think it's so incredibly important. There are health factors here for both you and your family. Are you high risk? Do you have family members that are high risk? Are you like me, homeschooling your children for half of the week and then they're in school for the other half? And so there needs to be someone there, and you have to figure out, is it worth going for the job or and hiring help, or do you need to be here? Do you want to be here for that? That is going to make a decision, and that could be daddy, mommy, grandma, whatever it is. And so I want to make sure that's very clear. But I think you do have to consider what's best for you, because it may also change. Perhaps you're only looking for roles that are remote, or you're only looking for companies that have stated, we're not going back to a corporate office until May, until January, whatever it might be. But these are things to consider when you're trying to figure out, am I going towards the short plan or am I going towards more long-term planning? I hope that makes sense. All right, here's some of the many resources that are available. And if you do go to topresume.com and click on the career advice to get to the blog, you'll find that we have a few articles that really go into all these different resources. But these are some of my favorites that I wanted to throw out there because they're not necessarily the ones you see everywhere, except maybe the last one. Levels.fyi, it's a really cool site that's talking about who is still hiring, and all the open positions are verified. Unlike some of these other resources that I'm sharing where it's crowdsourced data. And when it's crowdsourced, it's not necessarily anyone's going to that employer and verifying that information. I still think it's very useful, but that's something to keep in mind. So levels.fyi, you can actually Google that and it will take you right there. They have still who's hiring page. Upstream, it's an app. It's also online. Again, it's a community platform, so people are incorporating their own information in there. Stillhiring.io, it's very similar. Crowdsourced data. And so again, it's someone saying, hey, my company's hiring right now. What I like about some of these in particular, because it's crowdsourced, not everybody posts every job. In fact, before the pandemic, it was estimated that about 50% of all open opportunities are never published online, that you're not going to know about them unless you're leveraging your network, talking to people, and finding out about what companies are looking for if they're not actively advertising it. Maybe they hire a recruiter to just go find someone who's the right fit and approach them. Sometimes they're just talking with their own employees, looking to dig the right person up. But something to keep in mind, you never know about those opportunities unless you're leveraging your network. Some of these crowdsourced resources are people saying, oh no, I know this job's available. And that's wonderful, because now you know that it may not be published, but it's still worth at least looking into to find out if it's legit. Ryan Robinson's Remote Job Sites collection. I love this and I recommend it all the time. I have no affiliation, and I should point out I have no affiliation with any of these sites in any way, shape, or form, but these are all just anything besides your average job board. Ryan Robinson has this one blog article where he lists, I want to say it's 60 different websites that are all specifically for jobs that are either partially or fully remote. Flex Jobs is a job board out there, but I mean, Ryan lists everything, every job board you could think of, and he categorizes them, which I really like. So you can really slice and dice and identify which ones make the most sense given your job goals today. And then something else that I find myself checking very regularly, and I apologize for not knowing if it's updated daily or weekly. It's at least weekly. I know that much, but it might be even more frequent than that. Andrew Seaman from LinkedIn, he puts out both an article, a summary, and then a longer list of who's hiring now. And so if you Google LinkedIn and the hashtag hiring now, it will take you to that section. They have a get hired kind of stream that you can subscribe to, so it will pop up in your feed when you're on LinkedIn. And I just like to see it because it gives me a sense of what companies are hiring. Oftentimes it's who you'd expect. Who do we think it has a high demand right now? Well, wouldn't you know, it's Amazon. Wouldn't you know, it's delivery services. It's a lot of retail, a lot of food retail, especially for those who have now gone to delivering food, those sorts of things. But there are also other opportunities on there if you're looking for something that's more in a corporate setting. And those companies are also hiring for those roles. So don't discount it. Definitely check that out. It's a great way to get a sense of what else is going on out there. But these are just, I mean, this is 5 out of a long, long list of resources that are not your typical job boards that you find. Also, I always throw this out there, never discount a good Google search. There's nothing wrong with saying, marketing jobs in healthcare and just see what pops up. Google is now starting to aggregate job listings, so you can find them just straight there. It will also open you up to particular job boards. And I've always been a fan of finding a niche job board, one that tailors its content and its jobs based on a very particular industry or a very particular function, such as sales or marketing or accounting, because you'll see who's posting and you'll get a sense of which recruiters really work in that space, both corporate and agency. So you'll get a sense of who do you want to start building relationships with, but also there's less noise to filter through when you're looking for the right opportunities because it's not every job out there. So definitely give them all a look to start narrowing down your search. If you're having trouble figuring out, and I'm going to flip back, if you're having trouble figuring out, am I going for the short-term plan or am I going for the long-term planning? Looking at these resources I mentioned are going to help you make that decision because you have to see what's available. And if there's nothing available for what you want to do, you're talking to people, you're looking at these sites and there's really nothing popping up, well then you know, okay, I have to pivot in some way, shape, or form, at least for the short term if I need a job right now. Now, wouldn't you know, I want to talk a lot about resume writing and cover letters and that whole area because it's so important. And, you know, I do a lot of talks and I write a lot of content on the technicalities of writing a resume. How do we write it to beat the bots and, you know, overcome and get past the applicant tracking system? I am happy to answer questions on that for sure. But I do want to talk a little bit more about how do you differentiate yourself? How do you stand out in the crowd when you're applying for jobs? Because that's really what this talk is supposed to be about. I like to say this, and our CEO, Jeff Berger, says this a lot as well. Resume writing is both an art and a science. And the science part of it is trying to get past the technology, the software gatekeepers that most employers are using at some level to try and sift through applications and get it down to a more manageable number. But it's also an art. Because once you get it past that, you still need to stand out, get noticed, and grab a recruiter's attention. Because studies have shown that the average employer, average recruiter, spends less than 10 seconds looking at a resume before deciding to chuck it. And that stat comes up a lot. You hear it called the 6-second resume test. I'll give you a little background on it. job board called Ladders, used to be called The Ladders, did a study in 2012 where they used eye tracking software to watch employers, recruiters reading resumes. They were looking for other pieces of information, to be quite honest. They wanted to see, how does a recruiter read a resume? What do they dwell on? What do they focus on? What information seems to be most important to them when they're doing that initial cursory look? And what ended up being the most interesting piece of information is that they all said on average they look at each resume for about a minute, and it turned out to be 6.2 seconds. Now that was back in 2012. They repeated the study in 2018 and it went up to 7.4 seconds. Woo! It went up, but it's still less than 10 seconds. And so we know that you have very little time to grab their attention and make sure you end up in the pile for further consideration instead of the digital pile of thanks, but no thanks. You know, don't call us, we'll call you. So I want to talk a lot more about kind of the art of resume writing today. And I do have a couple of samples up on my laptop that I can pull up to look at if anybody has any particular questions. We also have samples on the TopResume blog. If you go to TopResume and you go to the career advice, hit an article, hit the search bar and say featured resumes, you can get to a number of different samples that we're featuring. Think about it this way. I said that when you look for a job, you basically become a marketer. You're in the business of advertising your credentials, your qualifications, your candidacy to employers. And so I think sometimes it's really important to take a step back and say, okay, well, why don't I put on my business hat and think about, if I'm in the business of advertising me, what are some of those best practices? What do some of the biggest and best brands out there do so that we know about them? Why do we know them? Why can we look at that swoosh and we automatically know it's Nike? What are they doing well? And I think that's really important because, frankly, you want to apply those same principles to your job search and to your branding materials, your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn profile. Anything that you're using to advertise your candidacy is part of that personal advertising campaign. So consider the following. Who is your target audience? All of those brands that are very successful have clearly defined the types of people they want to market to. And when it comes to your job search, we're talking about the type of position that you're pursuing, what industry or sector does that fall into, and the types of employers. There's been so much talk lately. Actually, we did a survey towards the end of, I want to say July, August, where we were looking at, what's most important to most job seekers when they're looking for a job, and cultural fit came in first. Cultural, it actually outweighed compensation. This was more important to people, was I want to be in a company that has the same values as me, that believes in the same things, something that I feel proud to work for. And so all that information has to kind of go into your bucket for what's your target audience when you're looking for a job. And again, you also have to kind of on the side be like, okay, which ones am I willing to sacrifice in order to get a job? Which ones are most important to me? Which are the deal breakers and which are the nice to haves? That's important to keep in mind as well, because that's going to help you shape your job search. What's your unique positioning? And this is two different things. What are your qualifications? If they're asking for X, Y, and Z, do you have X, Y, and Z? Can you demonstrate how you've picked up those skills? If it's not obvious, how did you obtain them in different ways? How can you demonstrate that you have exactly what they're looking for? Never assume that they're reading between the lines of your resume, of your LinkedIn profile, and say, well, because they did that, they must know how to do this, and it probably would work here. They're not taking that amount of time. You actually have to idiot-proof your materials and really clearly spell out how certain experiences translate to the qualifications they're looking for. And then standing out, we really talk about this unique positioning. How do you differentiate yourself? If you're making a career change, if you're taking a departure, what about your experiences in the past, both personal and professional, have shaped you and allowed you to have a different perspective, a unique perspective? What have you learned? This could be, I didn't go to college, but I worked 3 jobs and I still managed to make my way up. This could be, You know, I served my country, and I learned all these different things along the way. You know, Antonio Neves, who I did a panel with for Amazon Career Day, he talked a lot about that. What about you? Even what about your personality makes you a little different, a little unique, but all the more reason why they want to talk to you. You want to communicate your brand in a way that, of course, attracts employers, but also helps you stand out a little because it's authentic. And you hear that word all the time, authentic. So keep that in mind. And then and I specifically chose this word merchandising instead of how are you sharing, how are you advertising, how are you publishing this information, your brand, how are you merchandising this consistently across different channels. So when we see a print ad, a billboard, a commercial, even a piece of apparel, we know if it's Nike or not right off the bat. Why? Because it has the same look and feel. It has the swish. Target has a very clearly defined brand. You know it's them. They're finding ways, and they have differentiated themselves from, say, a Kmart or a Walmart, right? We're thinking about that for ourselves as well. And I don't want you to dwell and drive yourself crazy over this, but you do want to kind of take a look back at your work experience. Think about the other things you've done outside of work, and what are some of the things that make you different? Talk to your friends and family, talk to your colleagues or former colleagues, and get a sense from them as well. Sometimes you need a third party to provide that insight. But these are things that we want to merchandise. And I say consistently because it's not enough just to have a really great professional polished resume. You have to advertise your qualifications, your unique positioning, so to speak, online, on paper, and in person or over a screen, over the phone. And so you really want to be consistent. Whatever they're seeing on that resume, if they Google your name, if they look at your LinkedIn profile, you want to make sure they're telling the same story. That's also why it's so important to have a very clear goal in mind, because you can't have 5 LinkedIn profiles. If you really wanted to, you could have 5 completely different resumes. It would be really challenging, but you could do that. But LinkedIn really only lets you have 1 profile. And so you have to figure out how to marry that information. And that's actually something that TopResume can help you with. But you really have to figure out, well, what is my primary goal? Because that's got to be what I lead with on that online profile. I hope this makes sense. Okay, so a few things to think about when you're thinking about your resume. Do not think of it as just merely a transcript of your past experiences and education. We really want it to be a marketing document. And what does that mean? Well, a marketing document often tells a story. We always talk about some of the best marketers are storytellers. They draw you in. They're kind of setting the tone and leading you down to want to read more. Well, your resume has to do that as well, because oftentimes it is the first thing they see in their first introduction to you as a candidate. And so things to keep in mind. Always go back to what is your current goal, and then compare your information before you start making edits to your resume, or if you're starting from scratch. Even if you're going to work with a professional, if you've decided you're going to invest in a professionally written resume from a service such as TopResume, you still want to go through this exercise of thinking about, if this is my goal today, and this is what the qualifications are, this is what's required, let me look back at each of the jobs on my resume. Is there anything else I could be adding? Are there experiences outside of my professional work that actually should be added in because they really support this current goal and these requirements? Is there information about a particular job that I didn't include that actually seems really important now? And are there details there that now are not necessarily as relevant? I love it, I'm proud of it, but it needs to have less of a spotlight on it because it's not as important when this is my goal. So that's something to be really cognizant of. When it comes to the resume design, and I will harp on this over and over and over again, we actually just did this huge project at the company to make sure that all the different types of resumes that TopResume produces, that the designs that are used are going to be both very appealing to the eye, streamlined, seem modern, but also definitely work when they go through an applicant tracking system and they parse correctly so that you get past that applicant tracking system, that initial gatekeeper. Don't go nuts with a very fancy, intricate resume design. It's actually considered one of the top 10 deal breakers for recruiters. It was towards the bottom of the list, I will tell you that, but it made the top 10 out of more than 17, I think, was offered to recruiters at the time. So you definitely want to focus on lots of white space. Make it really easy to read each section, to know what each section is. Be very consistent in the headers you're using. Go with standard fonts. So Arial, Proxima Nova, Calibri. I'm talking about a lot that tend to be sans serif because that seems to be what's kind of more in trend. But serif fonts, Times New Roman, Cambria, Garamond, they still get used. They are still acceptable. And I tend to use those when I'm helping someone who's writing a resume for, say, a traditional institution, higher education. I tend to go more towards that look and feel when it seems like a company or an industry that really values tradition and the ritual and that kind of stuff. If I'm going for something that's more product design, some tech, those sorts of things, I tend to veer more towards a cleaner looking font style. But keep that in mind. You want lots of white space in between. I will pop up some examples momentarily, or later. But also, please keep in mind, you can go to topresume.com. You can go to the blog. You can go look at featured resumes. We have an entire section dedicated to featured resumes. And we're also working on building out a brand new resume sample section. So I believe, don't quote me on that. I could be getting yelled at soon for saying that. But there are lots of samples available for you to look at when you're trying to get a sense of what I mean when I say a simplified, streamlined, cleaner design. You don't want it to be an eye chart. You don't want 17 bullets under each thing. You want to break up small paragraphs and bullet points so that, again, it's just more palatable. It's easier to digest and understand the information in a very short period of time. And also, the most important details are smack in your face and obvious. Maybe they're bolded. Maybe that's what is bulleted. Maybe it's in a box. There are lots of different ways you can do that, but you want to make sure that the information that an employer needs to decide whether they're going to speak to you is crystal clear. I've had a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of journalists about this lately, where they said, okay, resume design, how can we stand out? How can job seekers stand out? What can they do that's different and unique that's going to get them noticed? You will always hear about those marketing ploys. You will always hear about the person who has a poster size of their resume standing on the corner at a sidewalk or in a subway station, or is mailing it wrapped in a chocolate bar, all these random things. And they work for some people, but is it going to be the advice that I give the general audience? No, because it's only going to work for certain people if they're in the right industry, if it makes sense, if it fits their personality. There's so many ifs involved in that it's not what I'm going to use as the general advice. What I am going to say is that if you want to get noticed, apply for the jobs that make the most sense. Look for the jobs where they have the core requirements and you meet those. And more importantly, you can clearly explain how you meet them on your resume. That's how you stand out, is when it's crystal clear that you're a good fit. It also has to do with trying to apply for the job as soon as possible. If it becomes available, make sure you're customizing that application, but get it out as soon as you can, because you are more likely to be considered for the role if you're one of the first group to apply for it. Because they're only going to get through so many, they're going to get a group to look at, and then it's going to sit for a while. When I talk about customizing an application, there's a few things. It could mean swapping out certain words to reflect the language that you're seeing in the job listing, which works for the applicant tracking system, but also works for the human being who's going to look at your resume. Because they're always sitting there going, okay, in my checklist, I know what I'm supposed to be looking for. The more your resume tends to mirror and reflect what the requirements are for the role, the more likely the initial person to read your resume is going to put you in the further consideration pile. It could even mean reordering some of the bullet points under your work experience to highlight the ones that are most relevant and most important, or even swapping one out based on something this role requires that's not as common in the other positions you've been targeting. So again, you really want to make it as tailored as possible. Since there's often a professional title at the top of a resume that kind of very clearly shows the type of role you're targeting, that's typically a piece of information that I put a placeholder in, but then I tell clients to swap that out or modify it based on the title of the job they're applying for. So again, it seems to fit. If you've held roles at work and they don't accurately describe the role that you performed, or it's a really unique, it's just to our company and super branded and it really doesn't mean anything to anyone else, you can put parentheses next to that, the more common job title for that type of position. So again, that you're explaining clearly to the reader that you do have the relevant experience. And then this is, of course, I'm saying do your homework. This has a lot to do with, if you know who the company is, research them, get a better sense of what they're about, so that if there are certain things you learn about them through your network or online, that can help aid you in the minor tweaks and modifications you're making to your resume. If you are overhauling your resume for every single application, then your, what I call the foundation resume or your base resume, probably needs some work, because it should be more of like a slight tweak here and there, an evolution, a few minor tweaks. You should never be overhauling your resume for every application. That means either your goals is not very clear, your goal is not very clear and you have a few multiple competing goals, or your base resume is still kind of not necessarily in tune with what you're looking for. I talked about this, but this is particularly important because we're also talking about people who may be making a switch outside their typical industry because their industry is not hiring right now, or maybe all of this craziness we've been dealing with over the past few months has been a wake-up call, and you're like, I don't want to work in this field anymore. I don't. You know what? Maybe this was a blessing. Maybe I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to try something different. I want to go a different direction. I'm going to go after what I really like. Life's short. I'm making a change. Whatever it may be, whether it's a short-term change or maybe more part of a long-term plan, whatever your goal is, if it is a pivot outside the career path you were on, chances are you will need to do some serious overhauling of your resume to get it into that right foundational or base resume. So really, when I was talking about rereading your experience and thinking about what you might need to add or remove, that's the reframing. You may even add, if you're looking at a different industry or sector, they may talk about the same things you did in different terminology, and you want to get familiar with that terminology so you can swap that out and talk about or speak to your experience in terms that your target employer is going to appreciate. So for instance, I had a cousin who was in marketing, but was in marketing for rental cars, and she had a great career going there, but she did not want to be in car rentals. She really wanted to move more into, fashion or, lifestyle brands and things like that. Obviously, that's quite a departure. So when I helped her, we were looking at her resume. I'm like, okay, you're talking about all these great accomplishments you had, but you're using very specific terms for your achievements that are related to your industry. That doesn't mean anything to the people who you're now targeting. So we actually need to use more generic terminology that's related to sales and marketing, so they will appreciate what you did there, and there's less emphasis on the fact that you did it in a different industry. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about reframing your experience. How do you put it into terms your new prospective employer is going to appreciate and understand? And if you don't know what that language is, a lot of it is just searching online, finding some trade publications or social media accounts within that industry to follow, look for who are the thought leaders, but also turn to your network. Really, and I say this on multiple slides, leverage your network. Look and see, who do you know? Who's a friend of a friend? Who's somebody who graduated from the same school as you, either the same year or maybe a completely different year? But who are those people that are working or have worked in the field that you're targeting, where you could reach out to them and say, I would love 10 minutes of your time over the phone or Zoom or FaceTime. I'd love to just get your perspective on a few things. I'm looking at pursuing a role in your field, and I'd like to get a better sense of what you do, how does it work, what do you love, hate, what's the good, the bad, the ugly, all those things, so that you can then use that information to start modifying your resume so it really speaks to the right audience. I hope that's helpful. And when I say optimizing with keywords, that goes back to, what are you seeing in the job listing? Does it make sense? And then leveraging your network, we talked about that. I just realized I'm talking way too much, so I'm going to try and get a little faster, and I will stick on for longer for anybody who wants to do Q&A. Even if we have to switch it up to a different format, I'll make sure that we can get some of that in. If you're writing a resume for a remote job, these are just things I really want to make sure that you're thinking about, because these are all different things. If you've ever telecommuted before, if your company went telecommuting while you're still there, or before you were laid off or you left that organization, you want to emphasize that, particularly if you were able to then, switch processes and make it work. Those are all great achievements, but really emphasize anywhere you've either extensively traveled for work, since that's basically not working in a headquarters or in a primary location, or if you previously telecommuted, you want to make that information crystal clear. And we have a really great article on TopResume about that, where it goes step by step, all the different things and the different ways you can represent this. Highlight the skills that employers want in remote workers. So are you comfortable at using web conferencing software, project management, online collaboration software? Think about the things that you need to use in order to be really productive and an effective and successful team member when you're working from home. If you've done it, whether it's a certain piece of technology that you're comfortable using, or these softer skills, which all set you up to be a very strong, successful, valuable remote worker. This is information that you want to start weaving into your resume as well as your cover letter. And then actually even just stating point blank that you're set up for success. Though the information you're seeing here, I would say that's more for your cover letter. Maybe it gets mentioned in an interview. It's less likely to be something that you're broadcasting on your resume. The other 2 points should be in your resume. Okay, this is something I also want to bring up because as part of the survey that we did with the recruiters and employers, we said, okay, well, what skills have taken on greater importance? And these were the top 5. And this is the order in which they came in. So adaptability and flexibility was number 1. Are we surprised? And time management was the least yet of the top popular. So things to keep in mind: you're looking for opportunities to demonstrate that you have these. You might work some of this language into your professional summary. You might work some of this language into your core competencies or areas of expertise, but then you have to back it up with proof. And so you want to think about, well, where have I demonstrated that I'm really great at any one of these? How can I tell that story in my cover letter? How can I tell that story in my work experience that explains how adaptable and flexible I am? How great my communication must be if I was able to do X, Y, and Z with all these different factors involved? How did I get creative in solving problems and finding solutions? How did I help, and how was I a good team member and a collaborator when I was remote? Because again, all this has more to do with what's going on with the pandemic. And so I think it's safe to assume a lot of this has to do with people assuming that they're hiring folks who are going to be working remotely, at least for part of the time. So something to keep in mind. I also want to push not forgetting about the cover letter, because in full disclosure, I've done surveys in the past and I've typically always found it's about 50-50. Half the people I talk to say, oh yes, cover letter, super important. The other half completely admit they never read them. But when we did this recent survey, we found that employers are more likely to read them. In fact, nearly half of the people we surveyed said, yeah, I'm actually more likely to read it now. Another third was neutral, and then a small percentage said, nah, still the same, not really reading them, I'm so busy right now. I truly thought this was going to be less important because they were going to be so busy with so many candidates coming in, but really they're trying to find ways to really get a better sense of who they're looking at, because they don't get to meet them face to face. So much of the interview process has moved online that I think we're finding employers are really kind of digging into cover letters to find the best candidates. Also, I don't have it in this deck, but they also find the majority, I think 68% of employers said the thank you letter, the follow-up note after an interview, has taken on much greater importance when they're evaluating a candidate. Because they're looking for some more of those cues. They're looking for additional information, for a better feel for the person. So if you walk away with nothing else, write the cover letter. Definitely write the cover letter. If you have an interview, send the follow-up note to each person you interviewed with, and make sure it's tailored. When we're talking about cover letter basics, you want to demonstrate you've done your homework. You know something about the company, as long as it's not a confidential role, that there's something about that organization that interests you, whether it's their mission, something that's been going on in the news lately, some sort of initiative they're doing, whatever it might be. You want to show that you've kind of done your homework on the organization. That could be even just identifying, searching online to figure out who you should be addressing the cover letter to. It shows you've taken that extra step. Prove that you're qualified. And for those who feel very confident in their writing, if you can tell it in a story, great. If you can't, then you want to be just very clear on, based on what I've read on your job listing and from what I've learned about your company, it looks like you're looking for someone who has X, Y, and Z. Here is how I have those. And you're giving them very short blurb that explains how you meet all those qualifications. You want to share something new. So again, what information doesn't belong on a resume that you could maybe work in here? Such as if you're looking for remote positions, explaining that you're completely set up and ready to go. Maybe it's a little bit more of showing your personality to show that you're a good cultural fit. Maybe it's something about what you've been doing on the side that didn't really need to be on the resume, but it demonstrates some more of those softer skills. Sometimes it's easier to demonstrate those softer skills in the cover letter. Think, again, we're looking for what's the unique thing. If you're not the cookie cutter perfect candidate for the role, what about your unique background actually makes you a really refreshing and cool choice for this opportunity? And then you want to create a CTA. At the end of every cover letter, just like any marketing email, you want to create a call to action. And that basically means you're trying to get the reader to do something at the end of reading your cover letter. Ideally, it's calling you and requesting an interview. So something about the effect of, I'd love the opportunity to speak to you about how I could provide value or how I could solve X, Y, and Z problem leveraging these skills. I'll follow up with you in a week. Or whatever. Normally it's a week after the close date of the job, or if there is no close date, then a week from your application. In the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me should you have any questions or would like to discuss my experience and qualifications further. Something along those lines. You're trying to do that call to action. I'm in trouble, guys. It's after, we're already at time, but we started a little late, so I'm going to keep going and hopefully everyone's still with me. Jenna, feel free to text me if I need to cut it off. I do want to talk about networking because so many people hate networking, but it is so, so important and so key to the job search. And frankly, it's also taking on greater importance in this virtual world. And I know that sounds crazy because you can't necessarily go into a large formal networking event, but you do have to find other ways to network. You still can network from the safety of your home or in very small groups, and it can still be very effective. We're talking about how do you stand out in a crowded job market. You recruit advocates for your job search. You recruit people who work in the industry or the companies or in some way are somehow connected to the type of work you want to do and are willing to raise their hand and say, this person's solid, we should give them a chance. Because, or just making those connections to learn about other opportunities. So I pull this out all the time. Please, if you remember nothing else, this comes from more than one study that's been done. The studies are older, I will totally put that out there, but I would venture to guess that actually this number has remained the same, if not gone up. You are 10 times more likely to land the job when your application is accompanied by a referral. What does that mean? You know somebody at that company, you were able to write their name into the application, or you applied for the job through the traditional means as they asked you to do, but you also sent a copy of your application to the person you know who either works at that company or knows somebody at that company and advocates on your behalf, sends it along and says, this is somebody worth talking to. They did apply through the system, but I wanted you to have a copy of their resume as well. Why? You've just bypassed some of those gatekeepers. You got an endorsement. And normally that endorsement holds a lot of weight for recruiters because they only trust it if it comes from someone that they trust. But also, if someone's putting you up and they work at that company already, it means that that person thinks you're also a cultural fit. And it's number one concern for job seekers. It's a number one concern for employers as well. They're looking for people who are a good cultural fit. because you could have the right skills, but if you don't really jive with the team, it doesn't work out for anyone. So that's why networking is so incredibly important these days. Okay. This seems pretty standard, right? We want to evaluate and investigate your existing network. So again, just like we looked at your resume and your cover letter and your LinkedIn profile to say, okay, do these things reflect the type of role I'm pursuing today? Do they reflect that I'm qualified and I'm targeting that type of opportunity? That's something we want to do. But we also want to look at our networks again and say, okay, people who may have not been as, I don't want to say useful because that just sounds so wrong, but those that were the best connections for us in the past and most valuable, they were the ones that were hooked up to all the right people for us in the past, may not be the same today if your goals have changed. So you want to take a step back and say, well, who do I know who's connected to this industry? Who do I know who's connected to this company or these types of roles, who has done this type of work before? Those are the people I'm looking for now. First, second connections, friends of friends. And then also don't ever discount looking for people who are also active in networking. If they have the word lion in all capital letters, L-I-O-N, on their LinkedIn profile, it means that they are a LinkedIn open networker, which means they will connect with whomever wants to connect with them, and they're more likely to respond. So keep that in mind. You also want to look to your fellow alum. Don't discount the people you mentored who have now gone up and moved on to other roles, especially if you're at a more senior level in your career and you feel like there aren't a lot of people above you anymore. Or perhaps you're at that phase of your life where a lot of people are retiring. Don't discount those junior employees that you help mentor, manage, supervise along the way, because they could also open the doors to a lot of opportunities. Informational interviews is something that I harp on all the time. And again, especially if you're going for a short-term gig right now, you're making a dramatic shift in career, or you're just starting out. In general, informational interviews are clutch. And basically that means what I just discussed earlier. You're setting up informal, informational conversations with people who work in the field at the company or in the industry that you want to or you are currently targeting, and helping get a little bit more information and insight into what you should be doing. How could you make yourself more attractive? How could you stand out? That sort of thing. We have some really great content on that on TopResume, down to the list of questions you could possibly be asking. I have an Ask Amanda article about that. That's how to ask your network for help, because everyone's like, oh, I don't want to ask anybody for help. I feel like it's weak. I feel like, I don't have anything to give. You always have something to give. Information, support, an ear. There's always something there. So ask for help. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to give that help. Here are some of the tools that will help you along the way. LinkedIn, I think, is a given. For most industries, it's a great way to get a sense of who's out there, what's going on. Don't discount your alumni, your career services or alumni services with your alma mater. They tend to be very helpful and are also often good at helping hook you up with fellow alum. Alumni Fire is a cool resource I learned about, I don't know, a few years ago at this point, where once they get enough people from the same alma mater, it could be high school, it could be a sorority, it could be a college or university, it hits a certain mass, and then it's kind of launched where people are saying, I'm willing to help. I want to help other people who graduated from the same school or participated in the same activity. And again, it's a group that's more motivated and more intentional that you can reach out to for help. When you're looking for virtual events, because so many conferences have had to go online, 10 Times is by far my favorite resource. I love it. Been using it for years at this point. Eventbrite has also been doing that stuff, as well as both groups have been posting virtual career events. So something to keep in mind. Never discount a good Zoom, FaceTime, or Google Hangout. We're all using them now. Have your LinkedIn profile and your resume up to date before you start reaching out to all these people. Because if that's the information they're going to see, you want to make sure it jives with what you're saying in your communication. And if you are going to sit down for informational interviews, make sure in the back of your mind you have an objective. What are you trying to learn about? Not everybody's going to say, oh yeah, I've got this great job offer, but there are perhaps professional associations they could recommend, someone else they could introduce you to, a course or certification you could be taking to increase your qualifications and make you more attractive and stand out. They can give you insight into what do we typically look for this type of role? What are we looking for? So that you can make sure that that information is crystal clear on your resume, or you can be working towards building those skills so you can display them on your resume. And then you want to have a list of questions prepared based on your objective. Since I know a lot of people hate this kind of stuff, here's kind of my sampling of subject lines that you might use. The last one at the bottom is because I graduated from Marist College and we are the Red Foxes. So this is something that I might use if I was trying to contact somebody who graduated from the same school and I wanted to be a little bit more playful than just saying, fellow alums seeking your advice. But these are all just something to help you get started, but you'll find out what works for you. It is a lot about testing. Now, obviously, there are a million questions. I'm going to get out of this so I can see you all again and make sure that I'm doing this right. Again, bear with me. I know we're over time, and I know that we're using new technology, but I did want to share, just in case you missed it, you know, if you're interested in learning more, I've referenced a lot of different articles, and they're all available on topresume.com/career-advice, or go to TopResume and just click on career advice. You can get to the blog. If you are interested in getting free resume review through TopResume, or you'd like to invest in their resume writing services, there's a special offer going through a site just for me. I'm very, very excited about this, but I'm now able to offer some discounted pricing for anybody who attends my events. So if you go to topresume.com/jobsearchamanda, you can request a free resume review, or you can look at that discounted pricing, those special rates. With that said, I'm going to stop sharing. Hopefully there are still people here. I'm going to get out of this so I can see all your lovely faces again. So excited to still see people. Thank you. Thank you for hanging with me for that extra amount of time. We are technically 5 minutes over from where I started, but I know that some of you were on even before then. And so now bear with me. I'm going to come back. I see the chat. Okay. I am going to start answering questions. Let me see if I can scroll all the way up. Excuse me. Devendra, Amanda, would you be sharing some great resumes on this platform? Yes, I would love to share some great resumes. I will get to that. I'm going to start because I can type comments. I'm actually going to give you all a link where you can look at some of those resumes so you don't have to go hunt for it, because I think that's the best use instead of me pulling them up at this moment. But bear with me while I pull this up for you. And of course, I'm shaking my table. So thank you all for dealing with that as well. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the comments right here. Okay. The link and I think I can stick it, they say. I can mark it as an answer. I just added it so you can check it out. What advice would you give to, this is from Awali, and I apologize if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. Ooh, so many, they're all coming in. Okay, let me start, and I'm going to move my way up. Oh, guys, this is going, there are so many of you. Okay, let me start trying to slam through as many of these questions as I can. How long does the info stay in ATS? That is a really great question. If it is an international company and they have to follow the, oh God, I'm not going to remember the acronym. I keep wanting to say GARP, and it's totally not GARP. So international companies, and you're seeing, I mean, even for our organization, because we're international and because arms of our business have to follow these rules, then, you know, we did it for everything, but especially international companies where they have to worry about how long can they hold information. It's those, thank you, Courtney, GDPR, thank you. If they have to follow GDPR, then that's how long they keep the information in there. If they are not, not all US companies, I believe, have to follow GDPR quite yet. So, or the US doesn't necessarily have to follow it yet. So it could stay in longer. If that is a concern, I would definitely reach out to that company if there's a concern there. Thank you, David. Thank you, guys. Definitely not GARP, not at all. That is completely an accounting and risk professional association. Maybe outside the Sam says, I don't find jobs that are really related to studying subjects in liberal arts in the case that most jobs are focused on engineering and labor. Yeah, you know, it's hard when you say liberal arts because that's so broad. I mean, I was a marketing major and I remember, you know, older professionals, you know, I said, I want to go into marketing. And they're like, what type of marketing? There's email marketing, there's brand marketing, there's, you know, so much different marketing out there. So there's so many different paths. What I would do is if you're not too sure what roles you're looking for, go back to what do you love? What subjects at school interested you most? And also, don't be afraid to reach back to your professors and say, well, what do you think? What makes sense? Go back to your advisors. I would also say, look at people who graduated from your school, who graduated with a similar degree, and see what roles have they pursued. And if nothing else, that will get the wheels turning for, maybe I should research some of these organizations, or maybe I should research this career path a little bit more. The Muse is a really cool site that has a lot of information, particularly for those who are starting out their careers. And they have a lot of stuff on career pathing, particularly if you're new to the workforce, that I find really interesting. There was a site called Wet Feet that used to have amazing information, but they let it go stale. They haven't updated it in a really long time. That was my favorite resource. What advice would you give someone who's looking to switch roles in a different direction during this pandemic? I mean, I think it really comes back to, you really have to do your research, explore what's available, make sure that now's the time to do it. And if it is, if that industry seems to be doing very well, and that's one of the reasons why you want to move that direction, what I'd first start doing is look at what types of roles are available, but more importantly, look at who do I know, either their direct connection, I already know this person well, perhaps I ran an advanced search on LinkedIn to see people who previously worked at my most recent employer in a similar role that have now gone on and done something different, and look for people who've made a similar type of switch. Those are the people you want to talk to. I can spout out a bunch of transferable skills that are attractive for nearly any role, but if you really want the nitty gritty, you want to talk to someone who's in that type of job, who can help once you explain a bit more about what you do and they talk a bit more about what they do and what they look for, they can help you understand what to highlight, because it's really going to come down to making more connections, really talking to people, finding those advocates. Beyond referrals, I call them advocates. That's what you're really looking for. And then reframing all of your job search marketing materials, your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn profile, to reflect what you're learning, and really reframe and reposition your experience to demonstrate that you're qualified. And not only that, but you bring a little something extra to the table because you have a fresh and unique perspective. This is a different world. Also, one thing I failed to mention that's really important if you're making any type of switch is find the bridge. What is similar about what you did in the past versus what you're planning or attempting to do next? And if you're trying to make that leap, you may need to take what I call a stepping stone job. Maybe it's not the full leap to the career change. Maybe it's something that's a little happy in the middle that will help you build some more skills and get you to that other role further down the line. But you're looking for, where is that bridge? It could be that both industries target a very similar audience, or maybe they're of a very similar size, or they deal with a very similar region of the country, or whatever it might be. They deal with the same types of vendors. Whatever it is, you're always looking for, what is that bridge? What about my past experience? Even if it was a totally different thing, how can I take some of that and say, this actually is very similar to what they're doing here? And that helps. Okay. What is, okay, ooh, Jasper. Resume summary, resume objective. Resume summary. I cannot emphasize that enough. And yes, I will argue that even an entry-level professional should be using a resume summary, not a resume objective. And why? Because an objective is typically a one-liner that's very vague and talks about your wants and needs. Looking for an organization where I can provide value and grow my blank skills. if you covered up your name and covered up your experience and read that and still there's nothing that identifies that it's you, then it means it's not enough. You know, there's not enough of it's too boilerplate. A summary is a bit longer. It can be in bullet points or it can be in a paragraph. It's typically anywhere from 3 to 6 lines. That's typically where you'll get most resume writers to agree. I used to say 3 to 5. I know I know that I've seen a lot of other people saying 5 to 6. So around that range is what you're looking for. And it's high level summarizing. This is why you want to read the rest of my document. I'm giving you a high level, maybe it's number of years of experience, what's that experience in, what types of things did you do, and more importantly, how did you do these things to create an output for someone else? So what's the value? What do you have to offer? And then, you know, you kind of do a nod to some of the more softer or even some of the more technical skills that are considered highly important for the role that you're pursuing. That's typically how I approach a professional summary. There's a really great article, and I'm going to try and talk and find it at the same time. And I will pop it into the chat. Again, bear with me, guys. It's the first time I used this software, and I wasn't sure exactly how it was all going to work because we had to make some last-minute changes. But next time we do this, I'll make sure I have all of my favorite kind of links ready to go. So I'm going to send you 2 right now, everyone. This one kind of talks about objective versus summary. So I just pop that into the chat. And then there's another one that I know I have in here where I have sample professional summaries, which I know is what everyone really wants, is show me an example. How do I write this sucker? And I have one for entry level, someone who's more mid-level, and someone who's more at that executive level. So let me, and all I'm doing, I know you guys can't see what I'm typing right now. I went to topresume.com/career-advice search. I'll actually just share this link with you. And then I've been just putting in search terms to get to the articles that I'm looking for. And it's a really easy way to get there fairly quickly. I think it's in the Ask Amanda article. Bam. Okay, found it. Here you go. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but apparently someone's getting their lawn mowed at the moment. Okay. Okay, Nasir was asking about Canadian dollars. You can actually go to I think it's ca.topresume.com, and that would take you to that currency. Oh, Cindy, such a great question. How far back on your resume do you go? Okay, so the typical rule of thumb is no more than 15 years. If you held one job that somehow spanned, you know, that past that 15-year mark, then we would find a way to work that in without drawing a ton of attention to your years of to the fact that it went over that 15-year mark. Why? It's not because that other experience shouldn't count. It's just they care more about what you've done more recently. And so there are nice ways where you can kind of get some of that information in there without going over it. Because honestly, and I didn't talk about this, but your resume should really be 2 pages long. That's the ideal length for the average corporate worker. And now if you're in academia, the sciences, your resume, and oftentimes you're using what's known as an academic CV or an academic resume at that time, those can be quite long. Those could be 10 pages long because you have a million publications and there's more information, different information that goes in. The average person, though, is going to be at 2 pages. 1 to 2, but ideally you want 2 if you have enough information to truly justify a second page. If you're entry level, you just got in there, you're making a very sharp departure, and so a ton of your experience really doesn't translate over very well, you may end up with 1 page, and that's okay. Don't add fluff to get to page 2. But there was a really great study done by Resume Go and a couple of years back. It's not that far back though, and they used a ton of resumes, a ton of recruiters, and basically they found that a 2-page resume was preferred by recruiters over a 1-page, regardless of your level of experience. So that's something to keep in mind. And let me see if I can pull that picture. There's one that I have, and I apologize if Jenna has actually done this while I was talking and found the articles and popped them in. Knowing how amazing she is, she probably has. But but there's one in particular. I think it's this one, this article. Yes. Okay. So this is my favorite piece on resume length, because it gives justification. It also gives you tips for if you have a very long career history and it seems impossible to get it down to 2 pages. It gives you some techniques and some tactics to try to actually cull it down and still make it a really impactful document. All right, I'm still going down. Jenna, I love you for putting things. Will today's presentation be sent? Yes, it will, Cheryl. I think it gets sent tomorrow, but don't hold me to that. One thing I would ask is, Jenna, if we know this for a fact, if we know what email address that email will be coming from, if we could share it with everyone. So we found that a lot of people were reporting that the emails, all the reminders were getting stuck in their spam folder. So one thing I would say is please, please, please check your spam folder to make sure that you see it, because we are most certainly sending out a link to the presentation. David says, I include a cover letter every time I apply. Many applications are too generic and there isn't a means to follow up. I think Jenna actually commented on this, but it's some LinkedIn sleuthing. It definitely is. Also, take a key phrase from the job description, wherever you found it, and Google that with quotations around it. You may find that the job posting is posted elsewhere where it's attributed to a specific recruiting agency or to a specific person or to a specific company. I've actually done that to kind of get there, but also just be aware if they're calling themselves confidential company and they're not putting information out there, they're doing that intentionally. So you want to be careful that you don't go too far down the rabbit hole of like sleuthing and you get too much information on them, because then they kind of freak out and want to know, well, how in the world did you know that? So just be a little careful there. But if you can at least figure out the company, and then you can figure out if you know anyone there, you could say, hey, I think your company is hiring for a role like this. Would you mind passing my resume along? That 100% is a tactic I would recommend you employ every single time you can. Oh, Jenna, you were putting links in here. So great. Thank you. Lewis, don't worry. We will have all of the resume points available onto the CTA. When you don't have a specific contact, how do you follow up? You can't always. Unfortunately, the moral of the story is you can't. What you can do is if you know what company it is, you might reach out. Also, based on the job description, if they say who you'd be reporting to and they just use a title, you might be able to narrow it down to a few people, and then you can kind of guess what people's email addresses are. It's often first name dot last name or first letter last name at thecompany.name.com. So you can try a few variations. Don't kill yourself. Do it for the ones you really, really care about. You'd be better off if you know who the company is, trying to make inroads. In the past, I would have said, hey, if you're trying to make connections at that company and you don't know anybody, hang out at the coffee shop around the corner from the office or the local watering hole that's around the corner, and have a drink there around, a little bit of the time before people would be going to work or when they'd be getting out and maybe having happy hour, because chances are you'd end up kind of bumping in, and if you're having conversations with people at that location, you'd probably meet someone who works at the company. A little hard now that COVID has forced a lot of us to not do those sorts of things, but a tactic to keep in mind for the future for sure. Is there anything else? Thank you letter, paper, online, or both. Leslie, love that question. Always start, I typically say start with online, send an email. You want to send one to every individual person you emailed or you interviewed with. You want to personalize it based on anything you know about them. And then for the companies that you really care about, pop something in the mail that's probably a little shorter and a little sweeter. A couple days, normally 24 hours after you interview, pop something in the mail. Snail mail will take a little longer to get there, and so you send that immediate, very specific, tailored online follow-up, and then they receive the paper one a few days later. I only do it for the ones I really care about, or the ones where I'm not too sure what I think the company would value most. But I found that if it's a really big tech company and that you're super, into high technology, actually, yes, follow up with the email. They're going to expect the immediacy. That's their world. But they actually often find like the paper very refreshing because so few people do it, and it does make you stand out. So it is another way. Zaina, what do you mean by customizing each application based on the job listing? Let me see if I can find. We have a really great piece. My resume tailor. So if you're ever looking, when I'm on the search field for top resume, I always put in customized resume tailor, because you always say either tailor your resume or customize your resume, and that's how you would find the appropriate information. Funny enough, I think we changed the image that I would have expected to see because it wasn't the best. Yes, customize your, I think it's this one. Yep. This is kind of my favorite article on this topic, so I'll send that out. That's a really good one for how to customize. Not sure if comment unable to stay. Yes, there will be a recording. Am I missing anything out? I know we're going on quite a long time. Unemployment due to COVID, but what about age? Oh, standard, I get it. I 100% get it. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of issues, of course, with also age bias. Age discrimination is very real, and also I found, because I did a talk with AARP, and a lot of the people asking questions at that town hall we had were that I'm also, I'm higher at risk, and I can't, or I have all these existing medical conditions, and so frankly I can't really be in the office at the moment, but I still need to get a job. I want to refer you, check out, AARP does have a job section, which means that those employers are actively seeking and opening their arms to older applicants. And so already don't have to worry about that barrier as much. The second, there's a great article. There's a version of it on AARP, but we wrote one a little bit longer for our own site on age proofing your resume. And it really comes down to making sure that you're highlighting why you're amazing for the job and placing just less emphasis on your birth year. And so I just popped that sucker in. Also, leverage your network. Think about the people you've managed over time, or the younger people you worked with that are now in different positions. They're great people to now reach out to. We are definitely at pretty far over. Oh, I love this. Okay, I'm taking some free online courses to learn new skills. Can I add them to my resume? 100%. If they're really relevant to what you're doing, you want to incorporate those skills into your areas of expertise or core competency section, which typically goes below your professional summary, but before you get to your work experience. And then at the bottom of your resume, or the end, I'd like to say the end because it's, it's often on page 2 if you have a 2-page resume. There's a section where you'd have your education. I'd like to say education and professional development. So you have your degrees. If you have a college degree, you'd put that most recent achieved and work your way back. Again, if it's outside the 15-year range, you include it. You just don't include a date. And then you would also put any certification programs or classes or coursework you took that are relevant to the role you're pursuing. And that's a great way to stand out. Oh. There's a lot here. So here's what I'm going to try and do, everyone. I'm going to try and go through this chat after the fact. I'm going to stop after this and get a big cup of water. And then I'm going to review this with a fresh head. But what I'm going to try and do is cull all the questions that are coming in. If I didn't answer something, if Jenna didn't get to it and offer a really great link, she's so incredibly resourceful. I will try and put that information together and summarize it, and then look to our social media channels, particularly look to Facebook and LinkedIn for both Top Resume as well as myself, Amanda Augustine, Job Search Amanda. And what I will try and do is, piece out these and answer the, do kind of like question, answer, and do a bunch of them that we didn't get to and try and reinforce some of that information. Also, when you receive the link for this video, we're going to include some copy below it. And so I will try and use that copy instead of maybe summarizing my entire presentation. I'll focus on some of the other questions that were asked that we didn't get to, so that you can have more information on those as well, or if there's any topic that seemed like a lot of people wanted to hear about it. Thank you so much for reaching out, for coming to this today, for hanging with me for an extra half an hour. There's just so much to tell you and so little time. I'm really hoping to do another one of these, maybe at the end of this year, probably early January, we'll see. Be on the lookout. I'll definitely let you know when that's coming out. And then also check social media, because I may be polling to see what topic you'd really like to hear more about, so that it's relevant to the greatest number of people. But thank you so much again. My name is Amanda Augustine. I'm the resident career expert for TopResume, as well as our sister brands, Top Interview and Top CV. And thank you so much for hanging with me today, and I hope this helps you. Take care, everyone.